Hello, today we're doing 2.5 conditional statements and syllogisms. So if you want to go ahead and take a second and watch this commercial and notice how statements are linked together in order to draw a conclusion. So I'll give you a second to pause the video and go to watch that other video. Alright, hopefully you had a chance to watch that. So, conditional statement. A conditional statement is written in if-then form. So, if you get all A's and B's on your report card, then your family will let you choose a restaurant for dinner. So the hypothesis of a conditional statement is the if portion. So if you get all A's and B's on your report, so that's the hypothesis that you're coming up with, then your family will let you choose a restaurant for dinner. So the conclusion of a conditional statement is the then portion of the statement. If you get all A's and B's on your report, then your family will let you choose a restaurant for dinner. So you have your hypothesis with your if, then conclusion with your then. So for each conditional statement, we want to identify the hypothesis and the conclusion. So if two angles are congruent, then they are vertical. So anything after the if is going to be our hypothesis, and then they are vertical. That will be our conclusion. Okay, so 2, if water is cooled to below 32 degrees Fahrenheit, then it will freeze. So everything after the if up into the then will be our hypothesis, and then everything after the then until you get to the end of the sentence is your conclusion. All right, so take a second, try 3 and 4, name the hypothesis and the conclusion. All right, hopefully you had a chance to get that. So here is the hypothesis for number 3, array bisects an angle. And then the conclusion, it divides the angle into 2 congruent angles. 4, Christy passes her driver's license test is the hypothesis. And the conclusion, her parents will let her drive the family car. All right, let's go ahead and go on to the next page. So, not all conditional statements are true. We can show that conditional statements are false by writing a counterexample. A counterexample is a specific example that shows that the statement is not true. So for each statement below, we want to decide if the conditional statement is true or false. If the statement is false, then write a counterexample. So number 5 says, if I live in Nevada, then I live in Reno. So that's false because we can live in a bunch of different cities. And so our counterexample would be another city. So let's see, we can do Carson. There's Elko. There's Vegas. Henderson. And so on, that we can come up with for a counterexample. So any one of these examples could have worked, and you might have come up with a different one first in your mind when I first read that. So 6, if two angles are complementary, then they are both acute. So remember, complementary adds up to 90 degrees. So they have to be acute angles, because if we had obtuse, that means it's greater than 90. So this is a true statement. We don't have to come up with a counterexample to prove that it's wrong. All right, so take a second and try 7 and 8. Decide if it's true or false, and if it's false, create a counterexample. All right, 7, if two angles are supplementary, then both angles are obtuse angles. So that's not necessarily true, because we can have 90 plus 90 degree angles, and those are both right angles, so those are both not obtuse angles. We can have 179 degrees and 1 degree. So 1 degree is definitely not obtuse. That one's acute. So there's a couple different examples that you might have come up with. Then 8, if a person drinks large quantities of salt water, then the person will get sick. That is true. You will probably get very sick if you kept to drinking salts. All right, syllogism. A syllogism is a collection of one or more conditional statements that follow a specific pattern to get a logical conclusion for the last statement. So if A, then B, if B, then C, so if A, then C. So if Amy makes the track team, then she will have to practice every day after school. If Amy has practice every day after school, then she will have to walk home from school each day. So if Amy makes the track team, then she will have to walk home from school each day. So syllogisms are kind of cool, and nice just because it shows you the train of process instead of stating straight, oh, well, if Amy makes a track team, then she'll have to walk home from school every day. And you might be like, but why does she have to walk to school? And so then you have to go through and say, well, she has to walk home from school because she has practice after school. So you go through that process of, well, if this happens, then this happens, if this happens, then this happens. So at the very end, if I start with this, I'm going to end up with this. So that's the whole point of this syllogism. So let's do number 9 together. If Corey gets a job, then he will save up money. If he saves up money, then he will buy a car. So if Corey gets a job, then he will buy a car. So if he gets a job, he'll be able to save money to get a car. So conclusion, if he gets a job, he will buy a car. All right, so go ahead and try number 10. All right, so let's go ahead and fill this out. If two angles are both right angles, then they each have a measure of 90 degrees. If two angles each have a measure of 90 degrees, then they are both congruent. So I took the if for my first statement and the then for my second statement and combined them together. All right, and that's the end of 2.5. If you want to watch the most famous syllogisms ever, go ahead and go to that YouTube. And if you have any further questions, please make sure you ask your teacher. Have a great day.